Chief for the Bureau of Land Management Wild Horse and Burro Program. Anyway, okay, so my role in the program is I oversee all the horses in captivity. We have roughly 40,000 excess horses on pasture, and we also have about 15,000 wild horses in corrals. And as you heard earlier, why do we gather horses? And a lot of the reasons we gather horses is because of limited forage on the range. It takes anywhere from 40 to 60 acres a year to carry a horse. And so if you multiply those acres by the number of horses out there, it adds up to a lot of land. And the land can't sustain the horses, and there's no natural predation to keep the animals in check. So through periodic gathers, like we described earlier, those horses are removed. And we try and keep a balance of forage and horses on the landscape and try and keep them in a harmony type of state of out there. And water is also limited. And so, again, periodic gathers remove those animals and maintain basically a healthy range or rangeland and healthy horses.
What do you think will happen if you wouldn't gather these horses?
Well, I
just
think
leave them outside.
I think if what we would see on the range if we didn't gather those horses is we would see a decline in vegetative condition out there and ultimately a decline in horse condition. And so we would see starvation eventually. Horses would drop off in body condition. We would lose large numbers of animals. And not only animals, but we would lose the resource as well. So again, gathers are important in maintaining a healthy range and a healthy horse.
So you're working for several years for BLM, and do you see any difference between years ago when you look at the pasture and how it looks now?
So I've been involved with the horse program for over 30 years, and catching horses on the range to adopting horses, and now I manage the pastures. I go back out on the range and look at some of those areas, and where we've maintained a healthy population of horses within the appropriate management level, our ranges look pretty good. But where horses have, multiplied 3, 4, 5 times the appropriate management level, the vegetation has disappeared, water sources have dried up, and it's becoming harder and harder for horses to maintain themselves out on the public lands. Ask me questions, I like that.
Okay, what should we ask? I have one more question. Some people are afraid that when BLM gathers horses, it's too much stress for the horses, and perhaps foals are getting injured and are dying during the gather. How do you see this?
So let's talk a little bit about gathering horses. We use a helicopter, and what we use is a contract gatherer. We have contractors that we hire that are familiar with handling animals, understand animal stress, how animals work and run across the landscape. And we hire those contractors to assist us in gathering the wild horses. And we try and focus our gathers on after July 1st of every year, after the foaling period, and then prior to March 1st. And that period of time between July and March is relatively easy on the horses to gather. We also limit the miles that we bring them. We typically bring them in anywhere from 5 to 6 miles out. And horses naturally run. Their flight response is quite strong. And so we bring them in a very controlled environment. We bring them into a funnel trap that we set up. We also use if you want to call it a prada horse to lead the horses into the trap. And then the horses are captured and then taken to a corral facility where they're prepped. And at that facility, we separate them, mares and studs, and then we end up gelding them. And we also draw blood, test their blood for EIA, and then we vaccinate them and we go ahead and prep them. And those horses are made available for adoption. Horses typically under 10 years of age go into the adoption program. Excess horses over 11 and older go to off-range pastures. And those off-range pastures are pastures that hold horses in either a mare group or a gelding group. And it's basically a retirement home. It's a wild, free-roaming environment off of Bureau of Land Management land. It's on private land. We hold a contract with the private landowner where they care for the horses. And those horses are checked upon by BLM representatives throughout the year. 4 or 5 times a year, we go and inspect those horses. We count the horses. We check body condition. We check forage conditions, and make sure that everything is in balance on our private ranches. So horses born on the range, that's sort of their journey. Ideally, we hope that they end up being adopted by the public, or even through a sales program like discussed earlier. And eventually, if a horse isn't adopted or sold, then it goes to the pasture program.
Thank you.
So, pastures. 4 of those 42 pastures are called public off-range pastures. Those pastures are open to the public. You can go and tour the animals. You can actually adopt or even purchase an animal at one of those pastures. They have animals available. You can learn about the wild horse program at those pastures. We have 1 in Oklahoma, we have 1 in Kansas, and 2 in Wyoming. And again, they're open to the public. You can, some of them even have lodges or cabins. You can go stay with the wild horses and learn about them, photograph them, and it's really a neat opportunity if you can't get out on the range and look at wild horses.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Mouse.
We got it.